911, what's your emergency?
There's a woman, oh my God. The gator's got her. It's dragging her into the water.
Sir, I need you to stay calm. Where are you right now?
By the jogging path, near the pond. She's gone, he pulled her under.
She was known in her neighborhood for her morning runs, her love of wildlife, and her unshakable belief that nature could be trusted. But on one humid South Carolina morning, Anna Fields became the victim of the very creature she thought she'd bonded with. What happened next was not an accident. It was the chilling result of trust misplaced, warnings ignored, and instincts awakened. You're watching Animal Attack. Subscribe, like, and tell us in the comments. Do you think wild animals ever truly forget what they are? Anna Fields was the kind of person whose habits became legend in her South Carolina neighborhood. At 27, she taught middle school English by day and chased the sunrise every morning along a trail that curved around a patchwork of marshes, retention ponds, and cypress-shadowed wetlands. She wasn't just a jogger, she was a presence. People knew her by her bright orange windbreaker and the rhythmic pat-pat of her sneakers before most alarms had gone off. Her social media told the rest of the story. Nearly every post included a misty dawn, reflections on mindfulness, and wildlife photo secrets, turtles, and, more than once, the sharp, ridged silhouette of a gator's head breaking the water's surface. It wasn't fear she showed, it was reverence. Morning crew out again. She captioned one image of a massive alligator half-submerged in the shallows. To Anna, these creatures weren't monsters. They were part of the community. More than once, she joked about Charlie, a particularly large male gator that frequented a drainage culvert near the south end of the trail. "He's basically the mayor," she wrote once, accompanied by a laughing emoji and a heart. But what seemed like innocent affection was, in fact, a fatal misunderstanding of animal behavior. Neighbors later reported that Anna had begun to leave scraps near the pond, bits of chicken, maybe even pet food. She thought it was harmless. Some even recall seeing her crouched close to the waterline, whispering like someone sharing a secret with a friend. One neighbor, a retired park ranger, admitted he'd warned her once, "Don't feed it. They'll start associating you with food, and then you're not a person anymore. You're a trigger." But Anna's response had been light, even amused. "Charlie knows me," she said. "He's like a puppy with scales." She believed that her regular presence, the sound of her voice, the routine of her run had built a kind of trust, and in a way, she was right. But it wasn't trust in the human sense, it was conditioning. She wasn't calming the wild, she was eroding its boundaries. Each time she appeared near the pond, she reinforced a deadly association. Not just food, but availability, presence, routine. She didn't know that Charlie was a territorial adult male, capable of moving silently through the water and lunging faster than a human could react. To her, he was a fascinating quirk of her trail, a natural wonder woven into her morning ritual. To him, she had become something else entirely, familiar, predictable, and dangerously close. The signs were there, posted, printed, and spoken aloud, but Anna Fields didn't believe the danger applied to her. Months before the attack, bright yellow placards went up at the entrances to the community park and along the marsh trail she loved so much. "Warning: do not feed or approach wildlife." They read in bold lettering beneath a graphic of an alligator lunging from the water. To most locals, the message was clear. The ponds weren't just scenic, they were habitats. Living, breathing ecosystems where apex predators like alligators could emerge with no warning. But to Anna, who had run that trail for years, the signs felt impersonal, meant for tourists or reckless teenagers, not for someone who, in her mind, had built a relationship with the land. Neighbors began to talk. One man, who walked his dog early each morning, claimed he saw Anna more than once, crouched by the edge of the pond, tossing what looked like bread rolls or chicken scraps into the shallows. "She'd just sit there, like she was feeding ducks," he later said, his voice trembling. "Only ducks don't kill you." Reports were filed with the HOA and eventually reached the local wildlife commission. An officer was dispatched to leave another warning, this time on Anna's mailbox. No contact was made, but the message was simple: feeding gators is illegal and dangerous. Still, nothing changed. In fact, Anna grew more vocal in her defiance. In conversations with friends, she'd laugh off the growing concern. "They're just trying to scare people," she once said during a brunch outing. "Charlie knows me. He knows I'm not food." That phrase would later haunt those who heard it, because to a gator, familiarity isn't friendship. It's recognition. It's conditioning. Experts in reptilian behavior like Dr. Samantha Ng of the South Carolina Wildlife Bureau have long warned that feeding alligators leads to one outcome: boldness. They stop fearing humans, she explained. And once that fear is gone, their instincts take over. You can't predict when, but they will strike. A former student of Anna's even recalled a class project where she talked about conservation and coexistence. "She really loved animals," the student said. "But I think she saw them like people, like they had feelings, motives, loyalty." And that's where the tragedy started, not in the moment of the attack, but in the countless moments before it, when Anna recast a wild animal into a character in her story. The warnings weren't just posted on signs or whispered by worried neighbors. They were embedded in every glance from the trail dogs who avoided the pond, in every rustle that made parents pull their children closer. The ecosystem was speaking. Anna just wasn't listening. And somewhere beneath the still, murky surface, the predator was already watching silent, calculating, waiting for the day the line between provider and prey would vanish. June 23rd began like every other morning for Anna Fields, the sun still low behind a curtain of Spanish moss, as she laced her shoes and headed for the familiar loop around the wetlands. The heat was already rising, humidity thick in the air, the kind of morning that made everything feel slower except the predator that lay just beneath the surface. At approximately 6:17 a.m., Anna was seen by two early walkers pausing at the edge of the pond, where cattails brushed against her calves. One of them, a local retiree named Glenn Harrell, later told investigators that she seemed to be looking for something in the water, her phone raised like she was preparing to take a picture. She bent down, like she was about to toss something in, he recalled, and then it was just chaos. What Anna couldn't see, and likely never heard, was the ripple of water just meters away. The alligator, a mature 10-foot male later identified by wildlife officials, had been motionless, hidden under lily pads in the shallows. To him, Anna's approach wasn't casual, it was the cue he had been conditioned to expect. In a single, horrifying instant, it launched upward and outward with explosive force, jaws clamping around her legs and dragging her with brutal efficiency into the pond. Witnesses described a scream that cut the morning air, high and sharp, then splashing, thrashing, and finally, silence. It was like watching someone get yanked by an invisible rope, Harrell said. She was just gone. Emergency services were called immediately, but by the time first responders arrived, Anna had vanished beneath the surface. Her shoes and a blood-spattered phone were found on the embankment, one still recording. The water, still churned with sediment and foam, held no sign of movement. Officers formed a perimeter while wildlife agents were rushed to the scene. But those with experience knew what had likely happened. "It would have taken seconds," said wildlife officer Denise Carver. He dragged her into the water and performed a death roll designed to disorient, disable, and drown. She wouldn't have had a chance. By mid-morning, the area was cordoned off, media vans had arrived, and neighbors gathered in silent disbelief. Many of them had passed Anna on that trail hundreds of times. Some had even seen her laughing and waving near that same pond just days earlier. But now, the air hung heavy with dread. There was no mystery here, no wild anomaly or rogue animal. What unfolded was textbook predatory behavior from an animal doing exactly what evolution had taught it to do. The mistake wasn't the gators. It was the slow, human unraveling of boundaries day by day, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, until the final moment, when trust turned to instinct and the line between feeder and food disappeared in the murky swirl of a single, lethal strike. The hours following Anna Fields' disappearance unfolded with grim urgency, as search and rescue teams converged on the park to recover what many already feared was lost. Emergency responders, divers, and wildlife officers worked in coordination, fanning out along the perimeter of the murky retention pond. The water, thick with silt and algae, provided almost no visibility. Divers reported being unable to see more than a foot in front of them. Yet the urgency was not just to recover Anna's body, but also to identify and isolate the animal responsible before it could strike again. By late morning, wildlife officers had narrowed their focus to a 10-foot male alligator known to frequent the area, the same one Anna had long referred to as Charlie. Based on its size, markings, and the highly territorial nature of male gators during summer months, officers were confident they had the right target. It was located by boat just after noon, basking near a culvert not far from the site of the attack. The animal was quickly tranquilized and removed from the water. The decision to euthanize it was made within minutes standard protocol when a human fatality occurs. What followed confirmed the worst. During the necropsy, officers found human remains inside the gator's digestive tract, including fragments of clothing and tissue that matched what Anna had been wearing. The announcement came shortly after sunset, delivered in a subdued press conference by county officials. "We can now confirm that the victim of this morning's incident, Ms. Anna Fields, has been recovered. The responsible animal has been euthanized," said Sheriff Colton Green, his voice shaking slightly. In the days that followed, public reaction was swift and emotional. Some mourned Anna's death as a tragic accident, while others questioned why earlier warnings hadn't resulted in stronger interventions. But among wildlife experts, there was no mystery, only grim validation. Dr. Layla Brenner, a herpetologist with over 2 decades of experience studying reptilian behavior in the Southeast, offered a sobering analysis. "This gator wasn't acting abnormally," she stated. "He was behaving like an apex predator that had been taught to associate humans with food. That conditioning erased his fear and replaced it with expectation." Her words struck a chilling chord. The notion that Anna's death had been scripted not by malice or randomness, but by a slow erosion of boundaries and instincts distorted by human interference was perhaps the most devastating truth of all. Wildlife officials later released additional data showing that in areas where feeding gators is common, attacks increase exponentially. In this case, the animal had not ambushed a stranger. It had recognized a pattern, responded to a cue, and executed behavior as old as its species. The tragedy wasn't that the gator turned, it was that it had never changed at all. And Anna, for all her affection, had unknowingly trained a perfect predator. In the weeks following Anna Fields' death, experts across disciplines weighed in on to sensationalize the tragedy, but to explain the cold biological truths that led to it. At the center of the analysis was one unshakable fact: feeding wild alligators destroys the psychological barrier that keeps humans safe. "Alligators are naturally wary of humans," explained Dr. Marcus Lanning, a leading herpetologist and consultant for the South Carolina Wildlife Bureau. "But once that fear is gone, you're no longer viewed as a threat, you're just a moving target. And worse, if they've been fed by humans before, you're viewed as a source of food." He elaborated on the specific biomechanics of the alligator's most lethal move, the death roll. When an alligator clamps onto a limb and spins, it isn't improvising. It's performing a specialized maneuver designed to tear flesh and break resistance. The entire process takes seconds, and once it starts, there's no chance of escape. You don't fight it. You endure it, or you die. For those unfamiliar with large reptile behavior, such violence can seem like a betrayal, especially when the animal has been humanized. But that, according to animal behaviorists, is the root of the tragedy. Ethologists point out that reptiles like alligators do not form emotional bonds the way mammals do. They don't love, they don't recognize. They operate almost entirely on instinct, pattern recognition, and stimulus-response loops. When Anna referred to Charlie as a friend, when she imagined he knew her and understood their relationship, she was projecting human traits onto a creature governed by an entirely different set of rules. This phenomenon anthropomorphism isn't new, but it's accelerating in the age of social media. Countless videos online show people hugging tigers, kissing wolves and cuddling with bears, framing these moments as testaments to trust and love. But behind the likes and shares is a dangerous illusion. Dr. Lanning warns, "We've entered an era where people confuse viral affection with biological reality. The animal isn't validating your feelings. It's tolerating your presence until the stimulus changes." For Anna, the desire to connect with nature blurred into something deeper, something that overrode her sense of caution. She believed that consistency and kindness could rewrite instinct. But nature doesn't trade in sentiment. It recognizes motion, scent, proximity, and pattern, and she had become a predictable pattern. Every morning, same place, same posture, same offerings. She wasn't an anomaly, she was a cue. As Dr. Lanning put it bluntly, once you feed a gator, you're no longer a human to them, you're a dinner bell. His statement echoed across news outlets and wildlife forums alike, a grim encapsulation of a preventable death. The horror of what happened to Anna wasn't just the violence, it was the inevitability. When wild instincts are conditioned by human hands, they don't disappear, they wait, they recalculate. And one day, they strike. The news of Anna Field's death swept across the country with a sickening velocity, her name plastered beneath headlines that seemed ripped from a horror movie script. Jogger killed by gator she named. Cable networks ran segments on the dangers of human-wildlife interaction, while social media became a battlefield of grief, judgment, and debate. Some users mourned Anna as a compassionate soul whose trust in nature had led her astray. Others weren't as forgiving. "You don't feed predators," one comment read, garnering thousands of likes. This wasn't an accident. It was negligence by her and by the people who saw her do it and stayed quiet. Hashtags like Gatorgate and Charlie the Gator began trending, morphing the tragedy into a public spectacle. But beyond the noise and hot takes, real consequences began to unfold. The local parks department, under scrutiny for not taking earlier complaints more seriously, launched an immediate review of their wildlife safety protocols. Within days, new signs were installed not just at the trail where Anna ran, but at dozens of public green spaces across the county. These signs weren't vague, bold red letters now read, "Feeding wildlife is illegal and deadly. Violators will be prosecuted." Fencing was added along high-risk sections of the jogging path, especially near bodies of water known to host alligators. Rangers were assigned to patrol early morning hours, and local law enforcement began citing individuals caught throwing food near retention ponds. At town halls and school assemblies, gator safety became a front-page topic. Wildlife officials hosted seminars explaining why alligators cannot and should not be treated like pets. Dr. Dade Lanning's quote, "You're a dinner bell," was printed on brochures handed out at public events. But perhaps the most enduring response came not from institutions but from Anna's community. Along the trail where she ran each morning, neighbors set up a quiet memorial, candles, notes, running shoes placed like vigil markers. One handwritten sign read, "We miss your light, Anna. We wish you had seen the shadow." Her former students wrote tributes online, calling her the teacher who encouraged them to write about nature, to notice beauty in the mundane. To many, Anna was a woman whose heart outpaced her caution, a trait that endeared her to people and ultimately cost her everything. In Florida and South Carolina, her story was adopted as a case study in wildlife safety campaigns. Short documentaries and animated PSAs were created to explain the real risks of feeding gators, each one ending not with a scare tactic, but with Anna's photo and the message, "Respect nature. Remember Anna." In the end, the public reaction was a mix of sorrow, outrage, and sobering clarity. Anna's death wasn't just a freak event, it was a preventable tragedy born from misplaced trust and communal silence. And now, with policies tightened and eyes wide open, her memory lives on not only in mourning, but in the hard lessons her story forced the world to learn. Anna Fields never set out to provoke danger. Her intentions were rooted in admiration, in a yearning to feel connected to something larger, older, more primal than herself. She found solace in her sunrise runs, comfort in the quiet ripples of the pond, and even what she believed to be friendship in the silent presence of a creature she had named and, in her heart, adopted. But the wilderness doesn't operate on sentiment. It has no capacity for love, no space for recognition, no memory of kindness. The bond Anna imagined was never mutual. It was a projection nurtured by routine, solidified by trust, and shattered by instinct. The truth is, nature doesn't do loyalty. It doesn't care how many times you showed up, what you fed it, or what name you gave it. When the moment comes, it reverts to what it's always been: indifferent, unsentimental, and governed by survival. The path where Anna once ran now lies quiet. The flowers from her memorial have withered. The wind flaps the warning signs that once went ignored, and the pond still, green and deceptively calm, holds no memory of the life it claimed. There is no villain here, only a tragedy born from misunderstanding. She didn't deserve to die. But she made the mistake of believing that love alone could rewrite instinct, that compassion could tame centuries of predatory behavior encoded in bone and blood. In that error, she joined the tragic ranks of those who forget. The wild is not cruel, but it is unyielding. It doesn't forgive confusion. What began as a gesture of affection, a scrap of chicken tossed lovingly into the reeds, became a lesson written in silence and finality. We tell these stories not to sensationalize, but to remind, to strip away the illusion that nature can be anything but what it is. So if you ever find yourself by the edge of the wild, tempted to feed, to touch, to trust, remember Anna Fields. Remember the stillness after the splash. Remember that nature demands respect, not familiarity. And remember this: the wild doesn't owe you recognition, it only recognizes patterns. The only question is whether you become part of its rhythm or part of its record.